Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is somebody who's spent more than 40 years, that's right, almost 50 years, so to speak, as a medical health professional, specifically a nurse. And when you take a look at her education and her background, you see a wide variety of interests as well as experience. For instance, safety officer for a major tech corporation, nursing instructor and educator, a school nurse, a flight nurse, and health care administration, as well as a death investigator. She also worked as a jailhouse intake and medical response nurse and was also a contributing author in Mastering Perception, which is a nurse's handbook for success, which was published in 2011. But one listening to this program might think, well, that all sounds pretty wild, but what does that mean to me? Well, when you take a look at what we're going to be talking about today, it sounds just about as crazy to actually approach this subject, but at the same time lends a beautiful curiosity. Most of us have probably heard the term Reiki and what Reiki therapy actually is, and there are also those of us who know about dream work. But this is the first time that I believe I've ever heard where Reiki and dream work were combined together to help us sharply increase the awareness of knowing what is needed to be well and happy. According to our guest, we each are aware of the causes of our physical ailments and have buried this awareness in our subconscious mind. Well, with Reiki, which allows the mind to open to the causes, allowing the body to heal itself, and dream work, which provides the opportunity to understand the messages in dreams, allowing the conscious mind to experience healing when fear dissipates. Now you can see how this comes together. Let's find out what happens when we actually put this into practice. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Collista Zook. Collista, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me. I kind of appreciate your intro there. I didn't know I was that old.
No, I was talking about your experience. You might have started this as you were a child in grade school, for all we know. There's a worm. Why isn't it moving along? Do a little bit of Reiki. Okay, it understands the cause of its ailment. It's going back to what worms do, which is worming, you know. That could have been something in the first grade for who knows. But, yeah, I was taking a look at your background here, and I thought, my goodness, you know, you got forensic specialist going on in here, an FAA certificate as an airframe power plant mechanic in your back pocket. I mean, just all this crazy stuff here, and then Reiki and dream work. What's all this about?
Well, you know, I have never actually lived a very traditional life. I've always been one of those who sought out the unusual. And in looking back over my life and how Reiki kind of came about was that I've always had a very keen interest in the question of why and who and how come. And Reiki kind of answered that for me, and all of the plethora of experiences that I've had actually kind of helped me steer toward Reiki, if you want to think of it like that. But, you know, my questions have always been, why are we who we are, and how do we really function within our universe, within our own communities, and communities also including anything that has life, you know, animals, creatures, trees. And I know that kind of gets out there, but, you know, death investigation seems such a dynamic sideline to life, which is what healthcare and health professional and Reiki and all of that other stuff is. But we're all connected. It is all there. So that's kind of how my life unfolded. And then Reiki and dream work has been in the last 10, 15 years.
Now, specifically tell us, for our listeners who, you know, may be familiar with at least the word Reiki or the term, what exactly happens when one practices Reiki on somebody who, I guess, is a patient, for lack of a better word?
Patient. I like to call them clients, but
clients,
patient is good too.
Well, I think of client, we think of Wall Street, and that causes a whole lot of ailments, doesn't it?
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
How about a healing participant?
There we go. A self-healing participant. I like that. Reiki is an old Japanese. It actually comes down from a very long lineage of Japanese healing medicine centuries ago. with the recognition that everything, literally everything, has an energy field around it. It is made of energy, and if you think about Einstein's, energy and mass and matter, that's what energy is. It, for lack of a better term, it clumps together and forms a mass. So we are, in essence, bodies that are energy all formed together to create this physical being. But we are not separated from other energy. Everything impacts everything. So Reiki, for instance, when Reiki is being utilized as a healing modality, we are actually, as a Reiki practitioner, I am basically funneling or channeling a very focused energy pattern, if you will, and it is universal energy. There's nothing mysterious about it or weird or, bad energy, good energy. It is simply energy. Mm-hmm. The body or the person who is participating in their healing is very still and very quiet. They can be sleeping, they can be awake, it matters not. But the body and their spiritual being understand and know where that energy pattern needs to go within that being in order for healing. So basically what I'm doing as a Reiki practitioner is just holding hands on, allowing that universal energy to focus like an antenna, if you will, or a channel to that person, and then that person, that individual who is taking part in their healing, they intuitively send that healing or use that healing or focus that healing on what needs to be healed with that energy. Mm-hmm. And that is basically what I do. We are, as Reiki practitioners, we are taught how to remove ourselves from it so that we aren't the one infusing our own energy. We are simply allowing. So that's basically what I do as a Reiki practitioner.
Now, it's fascinating. I kind of want to allude to, especially for most of our audience who are familiar with the original Star Trek series.
Yes.
And there was that episode where they were sort of experimenting on one of the crew members, and there was someone who did sort of a hands-on method where they would take on whatever the aliens were doing to this crew member, and this woman would take it on, take it away from them, bring it into her, and then slowly she would heal back. I don't know if you remembered that one or not. But I found that one really fascinating. Like, he might get a scar or laceration. She'd simply put her hand on that. She would absorb it, then you would see it appear on her face, pretty much in the same area that was on the crew member's face. And then slowly it would disappear. So she was taking on the energy or, whatever it was that was being passed on, took it on, and then it healed and was let go. Now, that's kind of an extreme way to look at it, but I kind of wondered, I was thinking of that, if somehow Gene Roddenberry wasn't to say, this is something that's really kind of out there.
Yes. Well, actually, that's a very, I am a Star Trek fan from many years ago, so I do kind of remember that episode. There is a group, I use the term group, but there is a practice out there. It's mainly in, I'm not going to say where it goes to because I'm not sure. But I know that there is a group of people who do practice in that methodology. That is akin to Reiki. It is Reiki, the study of Reiki, or Rei, meaning universal, Ki meaning energy. That intensive study takes on many different fingers, if you will. So there is a study, there is a group out there who do that kind of healing, where they take on the individual's or that person's illness or injury or whatever, take that on, and then they themselves convert that, whatever that is, that disease, that injury, and they convert it to light or they convert it to healing, and then pass that healing back to the person. That is a different and very specific, unique kind of healing. That is not basically what the mainstream Reiki practitioners do. Basically, the individual who is receiving the energy that energy goes to the healing. It doesn't come back to the practitioner. The particular lineage of Reiki that I come from, or that I have been trained in, that is it is not a separation. I don't stand back and separate myself during that healing process, but I'm very aware of when that might happen, that person's disease or their pain or their condition chooses to, and we could get into a whole hour on talking about how that happens, so I won't do that. But when that person chooses to remove that to the practitioner, we become aware of that, and we ask, we don't say it out loud, but we ask if that finds a different way, that energy pattern finds a different way to be expressed, because it is, in fact, it's a healing process, and it will dissipate, but it just, we do not take that bit on, because that, for lack of a better term, we have our own stuff. We don't need someone else's stuff. And it's not necessarily a bad practice, but it is just something that, as a Reiki practitioner, I would not do. Does that make sense?
It totally does. That came to mind, yes. And I was just kind of wondering. And in fact, for our listeners, if they're interested in the episode that I'm talking about, it's a slight derailment, but I thought it'd be kind of fun. It was called The Empath. Yes. It was that specific episode. It happened to be the Dr. McCoy who they were experimenting on to say, we're going to go ahead and give them this, and this silent, beautiful woman goes up and she absorbs this and so forth. And so I thought it was just kind of an interesting analogy, so to speak. So anyway.
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up.
So the empath, folks, that's who we're talking with here today, but in a different light, so to speak.
Exactly. There you go. Excellent analogy.
Now, what I wanted to ask you now you've been practicing Reiki for about how long now?
About 10 years. It's been Reiki, yes. We'll just say 10 years. There you go.
Okay, so for about a decade. So that's quite a long time now. What kind of people have you worked with in Reiki? I mean, what were some of the conditions or things they approached you about that you were able to, let's say, successfully at least change, so to speak?
Okay. And I'm going to preface this by saying I myself do not change it. I allow them to recognize and change their own. Very early on, during your introduction, you said, and this is true, we take part in our own disease and our own illness. So a person who recognizes through the channeling of Reiki energy, when that spiritual recognition happens that, oh, this is the reason why I have X, Y, Z, then that is how that dissipates. But to get to your question, probably now there's been what I would term emergent, which is the dramatic, almost to the empath kind of Star Trek thing, to the very subtle. The subtle would be the people who come to me or who choose Reiki because they have a chronic pain condition or they have a chronic inability to face a particular fear, let's say. Back pain happens to be the most common chronic pain that there is. And there is a reason for that. That goes to the metaphysics of what the back, represents, which is our stature and holding our own and being able to manage our life. So many, many people have back pain. Well, in working with this over a period of time, the individuals I have worked with who have chronic, particularly low back pain, they recognize within about the third or fourth treatment that their back pain is going away, that they can move more freely. It's not a get up off the table and, oh my word, my back pain is gone. It is a slower process because they're hanging on to something that needs to be quote unquote healed. And so over several Reiki treatments and in the discussions, they release that negative, that fear, that energy, and then the pain it's like, oh wow, this is great, On the more emergent, I have been in situations where with other Reiki practitioners, as a nurse, they recognize I am also the nurse. for instance, we had a gentleman in a particular retreat, and there were many Reiki practitioners and other people there, and they came and got me because I was the emergency room nurse because they thought he was having a heart attack. Well, as soon as I got there, he looked at me and he said, "My heart is hurting." Now, the heart is the essence of our love, our self-love, love of others. So when he said that to me, all I did was I placed hands on, which is what a Reiki practitioner would do. And I said, "What do you want to have happen?" He said, "I do not want to die." And I said, "You don't have to do that. That is a choice. That is not something that has to happen." So, in a long story short, he recognized that, and during that period of time that I was providing the Reiki energy through the channeling, and he was working internally. This was, like I said, a very prominent, emergent moment, and he was working on that self-love issue. Of course, we also did the healthcare thing, which is called the ambulance. Okay, the ambulance is on the way. We're not totally, we don't totally devoid ourselves of healthcare issues. But the ambulance was on the way. Well, by the time the ambulance got there, he looked at me and he said, "I know what my problem is." And he went on, and he's healthy now, and he's doing what he needs to do. But that's the beauty behind Reiki, is that when people recognize where their fears and their illness and their disease lie, what that truly means for them when they've created that process, that message that their body's sending, they can then deal with it. It is a truly empowerment and the ability to say, if I created this, I can uncreate it. I can fix this.
Now, I like that you put that way, because there is so much inevitable truth in that. When you go back to, for instance, the early, teachings and writings of the science of mind, for instance, they say that very thing. And this is the turn of, the early, late 1800s into the 1900s.
Yes.
And the messages were very direct in the books that talked about that very thing. In fact, I think it was Ernest Holmes that says, all sickness and disease comes from the mind, and it can be reversed from the mind at the same time. And you think, that's pretty powerful. Now, let's take a look at that as we see it today, and we realize that here was a man, as you were saying, sitting in the hospital with a heart that's hurting, and he was afraid to die, which means that he has surrendered any particular power at that time for his ability to turn this around. And when you take a look at healthcare, I would say, venture to say perhaps, especially here in America, that we have tended to really surrender that power to someone else because we don't believe that it started with us in the first place. Now, there's one thing when you're in a car crash or, you're out hiking and things, where you can become injured. But in general, even many doctors say that most sicknesses and illnesses that occur from stress and can be cured by relieving stress, which means there's a lot of personal empowerment going on there. And that if we could just start changing the fact that we've surrendered that power to somebody who knows better than we do, and finally say, well, I am willing to cooperate in changing this so I can become better, it's quite amazing what can really happen when it comes to healing, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and I'm so glad you phrased it that way. In our healthcare system, particularly in the U.S. Or in the industrialized nations even, you're absolutely right. We as a body of people have turned over our health, our power of being healthy and in a sense of well-being to someone else. It is a shift of responsibility, and that is the industry. And it's not that there are times when we really do need a physician. We really do need to go to the emergency room. We really do need to have someone assist us in maintaining our health while we work on other things. But the power that we have delegated to someone else who really doesn't know what I'm going through. I've delegated for instance, I'm going to use diabetes because right now diabetes is at an all-time high in epidemic proportions. That is I have turned over my life, the control that I wish I had, the longing and the sweetness in life. And diabetes is, when you look at the metaphysics of diabetes, it is in fact how I relate to my life, not yours, not the society's, not my beliefs, but how is it that my life has become a struggle? How is it that my life is now a sacrifice, and so therefore I have no joy, and there is nothing sweet and wonderful about life? That is diabetes. Well, we've turned over that responsibility, if you will, of the empowerment that I can make my life joyful. I have every fiber and every cell in my body has the ability to connect with my mind and my spirit and make my life joyful. But instead, we have turned that over society to our healthcare providers and into pharmaceuticals and into our diet, everything. And we've literally given away that power. Mm-hmm. And in Reiki and in dream work and in other venues in which I work with people, that is what I very much want them to understand, is that they are co-creators. I like the way you use that word. They are co-creators in their condition, and they can co-create any condition, which includes being healthy, being well, being mindful, and being in joy all the time. I can create that.
Absolutely, and I think, too, just because, geez, I've had so many wonderful guests over the years, and there was one particular time where I was reading about when you look at indigenous and ancient cultures, and perhaps in a tribe, keeping it simple here, you had a witch doctor or a shaman who was responsible for being sure of the health of the community that they were a part of. Now, when it came time that one of the members of this community had fallen ill, in whatever way that happened, and it was up to the shaman, or the doctor, witch doctor, if you will, to see about turning this around to heal, so to speak, the responsibility that this particular individual, this shaman, would place on not only the individual, but the family members and the friends. How responsible are you going to be for this healing to occur? And they would have to be 100% all in. And you take a look at, for instance, the way we have set up our insurance industry, and it just amazes me what people think about insurance. I'm going to buy this health care plan. I'm going to live this specific way, and I expect that if anything goes wrong, these people are all going to pay for it. And no wonder everything's such a mess.
Well, and I love words. I love how we phrase things. And just what you said, somebody's going to pay for this. And even though we, on the surface, may be talking about money, that insurance company is going to pay money for me to get better. But the words are, somebody is going to pay for this.
Right.
And it's not me.
Right.
It's not my fault. But one of the things that I thought of as you were talking about tribes and communities and families, they are invested in the health of an individual because that's the energy. Mm-hmm. That is the very premise of Reiki, is that like I was saying earlier, what the energy impacts, my energy impacts someone else, theirs impacts me. And it is a beautiful thing, and there are still communities in which tribes that do that. And I was thinking about a particular story I read here not too long ago where there was a tribe, and I don't know if it was South America or Africa, it doesn't matter. There was a tribe, and this tribe was very familial in that they functioned as a family, a large group of people, and they have no crime. There is no such thing as crime because they all take responsibility for themselves and for each other. But they had one individual who, for whatever reason, stepped outside of that structure and was creating quite a bit of chaos and havoc and was doing things that weren't appropriate. And I don't know what his transgressions were, but the tribe got together and circled around him. It was a big deal, you know, the shaman and the tribal leader and all of the women and the men and the children all circled him, and he was in the center of the circle. And as the story unfolded, as the author was witnessing this, they thought, "Oh, here it comes! You know, they're going to crucify him. They're just going to. He's all alone." That's not what happened. What happened was every individual in that tribe, in that familial community, went around in a circle, and every individual, including the children, said one thing that they loved and honored and appreciated about that individual. So here was transgressing against everyone, every tribe member, and by the end of it, it was over. That is the kind of energy and beauty behind a community that seeks to take responsibility for everything. And I just love that story because that is what I would like to see and what we as a society have moved away from. You know, we have separated ourselves from each other. We've separated ourselves from the very energy patterns that we were meant to be. So it's no wonder we have illnesses. No wonder we have, and I'm going to borrow yours, that somebody's going to pay, but not me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, insurance, healthcare. I said somebody else is responsible for my condition. And that is the beauty behind what I like to think of Reiki, is that once again we are empowered. Like I said earlier, I have a condition, and my condition is joyful, happy, love-filled life, period. I create that.
I'm reminded of a time where I did an interview with a woman who was actually co-author of a book with 3 other women, and it was about how each one of these women had cancer, and they were each of different, call them faith backgrounds, religious backgrounds, if you will, and each one was at a different stage. It was a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. But the one thing they all had in common in this book was they came to understand that their cancer was actually a process that was telling them about what they're missing in life, that they were actually initiates into understanding the deeper meaning in life, and how slowly but surely they began to turn that around and heal themselves from cancer as they understood the message. It's sort of, God wants your attention, He tickles you with a feather. If He doesn't get it, He hits you with a rock. You know, and when you take a look at really, if we really just paid attention, how we live, how we think each and every moment of each and every day, you know, you would come to realize, you know, I've really pretty much thought myself sick, or I have thought myself well.
Yes.
And to me, Reiki, according to what you're describing here, is a way that somebody can actually mirror that specific image, if you will, of where somebody is at in life.
Exactly.
Okay, good. See, now that makes I just know that this day and age, so many people are concerned about saying, you know, this vitamin will be able to heal all these things, and you got the FDA cracking down and all these people just gunning after these people that there are all these magic elixirs and energetic possibilities and trying to dismiss them. But I think if people had a clear understanding, again, as we talked about, their co-participation into where they are, they would realize, wow, I'm pretty empowered to do something about this.
Absolutely. And one of the things that that you touched on, and I want to kind of go in a little bit more depth on it, our bodies, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, if you will. Our bodies not only mirror what I have thought and what I have spoken out loud, but our bodies also, if you will, are kind of like a barometer. They tell us when something isn't quite right, when I'm not quite in sync with my higher being or God or my whatever I believe, whatever that higher self is. I'm not quite in sync. And so if I pay attention, first of all, to what my body's saying, and then I can begin, like cancer or diabetes, then I can begin to look at the reason and the disconnect as to why my body is telling me that. The body is simply a communication tool. And we need. I very much am a proponent that we need to be paying attention to the body. I most recently here, speaking of injuries, I was doing some yard work about a month ago and stepped off into a hole and sprained my knee. Well, you know, I don't know if anybody, there are many people who've had knee injuries, and those people who do understand that you don't know what your knees do until you can't work with them. So all of a sudden you can't do yard work. All of a sudden it's hard to clean the house. Life just becomes difficult. And so I had to step back and say, okay, what is it that I have a knee injury. What did that mean? Where did that come from? How did that impact me, and how is it that I impacted my knee? The first thought I had to think about was, what was I thinking? What did I speak to myself? How did I come about having a knee injury? Because that's basically what it was. It was a communication tool. You know, God hit me with a rock rather than, you know, waving at me from a distance. I had to pay attention to that. And that absolutely is truth, in that as Reiki empowers us to make our conditions and heal, we also need to be kind of mindful as to what our bodies are telling us on a day-to-day basis.
Fascinating stuff, and it's definitely so true that, you know, if we actually had the opportunity to really understand that if we had spirit just floating around, you really can't sense that you could feel, touch, or taste anything, but you get a chance to be in a body to be able to experience all these things, perhaps you would stop taking life for granted as much as you do.
Yes. Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe that. Absolutely.
Now, here's what's interesting. We're going to go ahead and talk about dream work. How did you come to bring this into the fold of the practice that you have?
Well, I have a Reiki master who is like the teacher of Reiki. In my particular group, one of the Reiki masters happened upon, and nothing really happens. It all comes to about in a specific pattern or way. But she was working with individuals with dream work, and I kind of latched onto it and find that I'm very intuitive with that. That is something that I can do. And, you know, some people work with crystals, some people work with, you know, homeopathy and fragrances, but I like dream work. And the idea behind dream work and combining it with Reiki is, like we've been talking, is the energy that is channeled or focused on healing and how we can empower ourselves to co-create wellness and co-create a joyful life. In the process of working with Reiki, oftentimes that subconscious, those things that are buried deep within us that we are, and it is across the board, afraid to look at. It doesn't matter how it became there or the reasons why we are holding on to those deep-seated, whether they're memories or beliefs or whatever they are. Those are unique to each individual. Those beliefs, pictures, memories. Well, in dream work, in your dreams, and there are three kinds of dreams. There's the problem-solving dream, and everybody has those where you wake up and you go, oh, I know what I'm going to do. Or you walk across the living room like I did last week and I go, oh, I know what color that I want that wall to be. That came from the process of the subconscious while you were sleeping, working through that and going, here's what you really like. And then the conscious mind wraps around it and says, oh, yeah, that's exactly right. Then there's just the shuffling dream. That's the dream where the daily activities get filed away or discarded, whatever needs to have happen. There is the third dream in which there is truly a spiritual and our physical, emotional message that needs to come through the mind. Either we are ignoring the body or we have disassociated ourselves from something. And the dream then becomes, this is a sleeping dream, then becomes the vehicle in which we, our subconsciousness and our hidden fears have to come through to the conscious mind. The dream imagery and symbols that come through in sleeping dreams are unique to each individual because their memory and their fears and their beliefs are unique. So in order for the conscious mind to be able to manage and to be able to receive that, because it is, for lack of a better term, so frightening, it is the dream that then encodes that message so that it gets past the fear and the conscious mind can then absorb it and go, oh yeah, I can work on that. What happens though, and this I believe, I can't prove it, but I believe that dream work has been going on for as long as mankind has been around. We have just lost the ability to really understand what that imagery means. But in the process of Reiki and dream work, what I do and what is really unique about dream work is that working with the individual, with the person participating in their healing, they are learning to decipher their particular dream imagery. For instance, one of my favorites is a train in your dream is not the same meaning as a train in my dream as a train in someone else's dream. It does not necessarily mean I'm going on a trip. It doesn't necessarily mean that the world is crashing to an end. It is unique to me. It is unique to you. So in working with someone who, through dream work, when we work with a particular dream, and it can be a frightening dream or a happy dream or it can be a reoccurring dream, it doesn't matter. We work with the imagery. What does that mean to you? What does the feeling associated with that image, how do you feel about that? And through that work, it actually, people begin, literally I've had people I work with, their eyes get big and they're like, I never thought of that. And then pretty soon they are so involved in decoding that particular dream that they become very excited because it's no longer frightening. It's no longer this huge fear that they had. It is releasing. It literally, phew, you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that was there. And then the body responds, and then later on they go, you know that ankle pain I had? It went away when I worked with the dream. And I'm like, of course it did. But that's the beauty behind dream work, is that working with the person's image that they have in their dream is almost like working with Reiki, focusing the energy. They go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And it's quite beautiful to see someone who opens their eyes, they go, oh, I didn't know that. And then all of a sudden they're no longer afraid of what that was, that memory, that belief, whatever it was.
Now, it's fascinating because dreams have been one of those things, there are just, who knows, thousands of books written about what they are, and there are those people out there that have written about dream interpretation, which I have a few times on the show said, I know they mean well, but I don't really think they're really worth, I don't know, the pages they're printed on, because, as you have said, dreams are very unique to the individual, to what we absorb as far as memories and experiences, and you're hitting it on the head here to say it's also the way the subconscious can communicate to you in a way that you can understand and keep up with.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. And the one thing that I tell my clients when I'm talking about doing dream work, you will never have a dream that needs to be worked with that you have not been prepared for. In other words, it's not going to be the most scary thing ever because you're not ready for that. This is something you're ready for. Mm-hmm. So we'll work through the imagery. But it is simply, there's a reason why we bury things in our subconscious and don't want to talk about them, because they're frightening or they're hurtful or there's something we don't fully understand. And so the subconscious phrases it in such a way that the conscious mind can go, oh, yeah, I can deal with that right now. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Now, interestingly enough, as you bring up nightmares, people are, of course, terrified of that. And nightmares can be very daunting, but there was a tribe in China, I remember as I was reading a lot about dreams in the early part of the 1990s, they're known as Sonoy, I believe. And they actually, that is part of their dream initiation. They're known as the dreaming people because that's exactly what they do is they work at achieving a lucid state of dreaming because it is within the lucid state you realize not only do I have control of what's going on in my dream, I'm not just a passive observer having experiences, but I am a co-creator of these experiences to sometimes very phenomenal levels. But the first thing you have to do as a rite of passage is to be able to have your nightmare and to, I guess, conquer it, if you will.
Yeah. Right.
And to get to that level to realize, wait a minute, this thing that's imposing itself on you is something that you can actually come back and say, wait a minute, I'm going to do this instead.
Yes.
And it becomes really quite amazing when you have nightmares and you start doing that, I think, that you become more intrigued where you want to have more of them because, quite frankly, it can be quite an adrenaline rush.
Really, it can. Yes, and I've been working with dreams now for about 4 or 5 years,
mm-hmm.
and it's a learning curve just like anything else, because that's again something that we as a society have stepped away from. Dreams are just dreams. We just and not to disrespect the authors of all those dream interpretation manuals. They have their place, but we have stepped away from the premise of who we are. And in dreams, nightmares, and in working with it, when I first started out, it was a labor. It was very tedious because I had to learn how to keep myself open to the interpretation for me. So, you write out your dream letter, by color, by whatever's going on, and then you go back. And now I've gotten to the point where, and many people learn to do this, some learn it much easier than others, how to stay in that lucid state, like you were talking about, and either change the pattern in the dream, that is healing, or be able to interpret on the spot what's going on, that is healing, or to be able to wake up and say, I've got it, and that is healing. So the idea, and I have heard of this tribe, or this group of people, and I don't know, I'm sitting here going, wow, I need to do more studying on dreams, because that is in essence what I do and what Reiki does with dream work, is it allows the individual to view that imagery in a safe, sacred place so that I can deal with that huge nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmares are, in essence, an emergency. The subconscious is saying, this is something you have to deal with right now. And, sometimes that imagery, and I've had nightmares, I know everyone does at some point, when you wake up, the last thing you want to do is go over that terrible nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
I want that imagery to go away. But in dealing with it, you begin to realize that it is the big rock up beside the head. It isn't there to be painful. It is there to get your attention. And working with it is very, very freeing.
Going back to these authors who have penned the books that talk about what dream symbols and interpretation, sort of like 10,000 Dreams Interpreted, not to disrespect their work, just like you said, I honor it because what it does is it opens the door to the possibility for people who may not dream or remember dreams to begin to do so, to realize there is a tremendous personal power that you have within you. You keep hearing it's, for instance, like in The Wizard of Oz, it's been there the whole time. It's inside you the whole time. Everything you'll ever need is right there. And dreams, the more you work with them or the more you experience them, the more you engage in them, if you can get to that state of lucidity, which all of us can, it's just like exercising. You condition yourself for this, that you will just be astounded. Sometimes you won't even want to wake up.
Exactly, and I've been there too. As a matter of fact, I rolled over and said, "I'm going back to that dream," because I want to complete that dream. So yeah, it is. I find it to be very, very fun. I mean, it's actually kind of exciting because I've gotten to the point in my life and in working with others that it becomes fun. The imagery and the symbols and the involvement of the energy and what it takes to decipher that, and then the freement, that freeing spirit afterward. You go, this is fun. This is like a roller coaster ride. I want to get on it again. So
yeah, it's very enthralling. I mean, it's exciting, and you take a look at the fact that your body, the impulses it receives from dreams, whether they're bad or good, are very real to the body.
Yes.
So imagine, for instance, one of the states, and this is from talking with, for instance, people who love doing dream work and dream interpretation over the years. Even this is just my own curiosity. When they say the lucid state, one of the first things people try to attempt to do is to fly. And if you can get to that point where you're flying, for instance, like Superman, I mean really flying in your dreams, there's an exhilaration that your body experiences, that gives you an endorphic high, if you will.
Yes.
It would be hard to be really sick when you're dreaming like that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it would be hard. I absolutely agree. I myself have done the same thing. It's like I did not necessarily fly like Superman, but I would get to the highest point of a mountain or a building or whatever and jump off.
Right.
And see how far and how long I could stay in the air, and it is exhilarating. And then you wake up, and I'd be so full of joy and excitement for the day. Nothing could alter my happiness that day. Because it's very physiologically impacts the body. The chemicals change. The chemicals in the actual physical brain change. The endorphins go up. So I really like what you're saying, because that only solidifies and supports the idea and the concept that as a society and as a people and as an individual, we need to be working with our bodies and our minds and our dreams more often. Mm-hmm. Because that's I believe truly that is a link that maybe our super ancestors, thousands of years ago, probably did all the time. They shamans and medicine men and soothsayers, those people, that's what they did.
Well, you can see how, just for the listeners out there, how Reiki and then dream work can merge together in such a beautiful way that teaches us that we can now attune and be in tune with an energy matrix and be able to decipher what it's sharing with us around this. And I remember years ago interviewing with anthropologist Wade Davis, who's really well known for his work, The Serpent and the Rainbow, which became a horror movie, but quite interesting nevertheless. Where I came to the awareness to how do these shamans, for instance, know which plants are medicinal and how to use them. And, plants have this ability, and we've even talked about this on the program, to communicate with us, to basically come into our world and say, here's my value. You come and you share with me who you are, and I'm going to share with you who I am, because we're in this together, so to speak.
Right.
And you realize that they could go out and precisely find the right things. And I was thinking, what if in dream work the plant came in and whispered, this is what you've been looking for, here's what I look like, and here's how I can be found. And you begin to use these properties, you take on that energy, and you get further communication and knowledge. So far, books are great for gaining knowledge, but I would say that's a pretty dynamic way to approach things.
Yes, I agree. That's a nice way to look at it, because I believe that's probably what happens and what has happened. I don't know, but obviously I and you and other people have said to each other over a meal, well, I wonder who was the first guinea pig who ate this berry and realized that this berry was not going to kill us, Mm-hmm. And maybe that's exactly how it happened, is they had a dream weaver, or we'll just call them dream weavers, who said, let me dream on that. Let me ask. And the plant came and said, I'm healthy. Eat me. It could very well have happened that way. I don't know why it wouldn't.
I don't know why, but this just comes to me, Collista, and I think this might even be of interest to our listening audience. The mind is set up in such a way that we tend to forget. We really remember everything we ever absorb and take in, but you never remember it all at once because the brain is set up for a way that it can block a lot of that out. I mean, just imagine if you could remember everything all the time, you'd probably go crazy, okay?
Right.
Now, I just wonder, and this is just an interesting way to look at this, you have this big marijuana debate, okay? Now, here is a weed, which basically that's what marijuana is, that has come into our world that when people use it, especially recreationally, we tend to lose some of our short-term memory, according to medical studies. And God knows anybody who's tried it, and I know I enjoyed it back in high school and college. Yeah, I forgot where I put my car keys. But that you see so much of it coming on the horizon, and I wonder it's because the popularity is for the reason we have been bombarded by so much technology, so much information, so much advertising from everywhere. No wonder we're turning to this more and more just so we could just block some of this stuff out because we're not in nature the way we used to be. What are your thoughts on something like that? Not that you're a medical marijuana or a marijuana expert. I just, looking at everything we've been talking about, I thought it'd be an interesting thing to observe.
Yes. It is kind of fascinating, and I have actually kind of toyed with that. I haven't, that concept. I haven't really articulated it quite like you did. However, throughout my life, okay, part of that 40 years in working with people in hospitals and working with death investigation and working with child abuse and all of those things that I did, one of the things that I became very ardent believer, I became a very ardent observer of human behavior. And one of the things that I am very keenly aware of, particularly in today's generation, the 20s and 30s, that age group of today, you know, they're feeling, and this, I don't have any research to say, yeah, this is where I found that data, but when you watch these individuals and when you look at them and the marijuana being, you know, part of that culture, and, you know, being legal, part of the other things that they do, when you watch them, what are they doing? They're on their cell phones, they're on their computers, they've got their cars all digitally, you know, hyped up to do multitudes of things and so that I don't have to think about it. And what I see is that we have a generation, plural, of individuals who feel so disconnected because there is no energy that pulls them as a community. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know that if you've noticed this, but I'm very well aware that if I go to a public place, let's say like the airport, everyone, almost without exception, is either looking at their cell phone because they're texting or they're playing a game or they're YouTube, whatever they're doing, or they're staring through people. They're not even making a physical, visual connection. No one's talking unless it is to give you an order, like, you know, you're touching my suitcase, or, you know, glaring at you because you stood too close, because I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm like, dude, the line isn't going any faster because you're standing on my heel. But we are so disconnected from the communication of energy between people. You know, the what you were speaking of, where we have we need to numb this barrage of electronic energy going into our brains and through our eyes, that we need to numb that because we no longer have the ability or the resources, we don't believe, the resources to, quote unquote, chill out. Mm-hmm. And to have a conversation with an eyeball-to-eyeball, verbal conversation with someone that I can reach out and touch. Literally. Not the telephone company saying reach out and touch them. Literally reach out across the table and touch someone's arm and say, that was a wonderful idea. We've ceased to understand how important that is. Mm-hmm. There is a thing that when I was in nursing school very early on that I did not know existed, and to this day see it even in adults. And that is a thing called failure to thrive. Failure to thrive. Babies who are not touched die. Mm-hmm. Infants, toddlers who are not touched, who are not physically in contact with the touching, who are not heard, who cannot see, they die. Now we have adults doing the same thing. It's maybe a different kind of death, but they shut themselves off. So I agree. I think the desire for getting numb is what they're seeing, is getting numb, the medical marijuana, the other substances of choice, whether it be prescription or otherwise, caffeine, these are all things that help us, quote unquote, feel. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
I feel excited, yeah.
Because I was just thinking about that whole thing as we've been talking about Reiki and dream work and kind of taking this in a direction where our listeners can see the value of how you work with people, how you get them to turn around and get back into tune, to feel again, to realize I should put all this away at least for a while and go out there and listen to the wind going through the trees. I should go out there and just lay and roll around in the grass, perhaps even naked, just to feel the sensation of what that feels like. And, taking a look, back at the great marijuana debate, you look at the boomers, and we used it pretty much recreationally. It was more for fun. Most of them, a fair amount of them, have quit as they got into their older adult years. But the argument I've seen has taken a tone of necessity more than recreation. And I don't know, do you see it that way as well?
I do.
Not that we want to spend too much time on this, but it's just interesting to observe things in that particular way.
Yes. And I think that extends to all of our, this is probably a politically negative thing to say, but the pill popping. We have a pill for everything. We have a medication for everything. And that's just that mentality that I don't know what else to do. Mm-hmm. So this must be an answer because I don't know what else to do. It is kind of sad, but I kind of like the visual that you gave about rolling around in the grass and getting out and listening to trees. I have an adult daughter, and she was one of the early. She's almost 30. She'll die when she finds out I told people that, but she very early on, she was one of the first generations that the cell phone was part of her hand. I mean, she wouldn't even put it in a purse or a pocket. She carried it around in her hand because that was her connection to her friends and to things. And these were all the old cell phones that didn't do anything but ring. They didn't have. I call mine a handheld computer with a phone app. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely agree with you. I believe we have. We are reaching out as a society and as individuals. We are reaching out for anything that helps us connect at that very basic survival way. But we've lost, I believe people have lost what that is. So the connection is numbing with substances or hyping up with caffeine and other substances, when really, if you just take a walk in the middle of a field somewhere and sit down and watch the clouds, listen to the birds, don't hit the bee, just watch what the bee's doing. That is the connection that we're missing.
Mm-hmm. And they can find out how to get connected and even reconnected to themselves by visiting you, especially your website is nextstepliving.us, I understand, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Very good. And are you able to work with people by phone or by Skype as well?
I have not tried the Skype. Now, the Reiki 2, which is long-distance healing, in other words, the person is not with me, both dream work and Reiki 2 can be done at a distance, if you will, over the phone or through a different modality. But once again, what I would like to stress is that irrespective of whether it's long-distance healing through Reiki 2 or through dream work, working with your dreams over the phone. Once again, it is that personal one-on-one or group-on-one, whatever that looks like, getting into the same energy field, being with you, the client, being with you, the participant in your healing, in the same room is absolutely a phenomenal kind of thing, because that's what we're missing. However, that isn't the only way.
Well, Collista, I want to thank you for coming into our energy field and enlightening our audience about how Reiki and dream work can actually affect a profound change for you to get reconnected and enjoy life in the way that you were meant to do, is to enjoy and play in it. And it's been a real pleasure to have you here on the Beyond 50 radio program. And for our listeners, go ahead and give out your website one more time. It's
Next Step Living, all one word, at, so that's my email. Never mind. nextstepliving.us.
Nextstepliving.us. Collista, thank you again for joining us here on the program today. And by the way, just to remind our listeners, the original Star Trek episode was The Empath. Okay, yes. That's for those of you. And we were talking about souls and bodies, so another Star Trek episode you might want to take a look at from the original series is Return to Tomorrow. So be sure you check those out as well. Collista, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there. Take the next step. You can also find out more by visiting us at Beyond50Radio.com, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Beyond50Radio as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.